Alrighty, so my name is Ria Mehta, and I'm the president of Empower Club. At Empower, our goal is to inspire and enable women in technology and various other fields. Our intention is to know successful women and men in their fields and learn from their journeys, challenges they encountered, how they overcame those, and how they expanded their own careers. Today, we have the honor of welcoming Mr. Deepen Shah. He has over 15 years of IT experience. He is a growth-minded professional with a passion for technology. Mr. Shah currently works at Google as a data center transformation lead and has been since 2020. Having spearheaded transformative projects and navigated complex technological landscapes, Mr. Shah brings a wealth of experience and wisdom to the table. His insights into the ever-evolving world of IT and, more importantly, artificial intelligence as an up-and-coming area of expertise promise to enlighten and inspire us all. So without further ado, let us delve into the fascinating journey and invaluable insights. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to the remarkable leader, Mr. Shah. Welcome, and it's good to have you.
Great. Thanks, Ria. And I think thanks for the opportunity. And I think it's a good, I think what you're trying to do with bringing in professionals and talk about technology and empowering women, I think it's a great effort. So I want to congratulate you first on that. And I wish you success.
Thank you. All right, so getting right into it, let's start with talking a little bit about ethical principles. When we talk about certain AI systems and such, what ethical principles do you believe should guide the development and deployment of them?
Yeah, I believe, I think AI is a technology, but any technology that has come over the past several 20, 50, 100 years have gone through a level of ethical principles, right? So this is no different. But AI specifically, just because this is probably the closest technology that can think and act and interact like humans. So I would say I would start with it should be developed with a primary goal of benefiting humans, right? This
Yeah,
includes everything from improving healthcare, education, environmental sustainability, and other areas that could enhance human well-being, right? It should be used to not cause harm intentionally or unintentionally, right? That's super clear. And that
yeah,
is in the hands of the developers, right? Developers must strive to minimize risk and potential negative impacts on individuals or a group of individuals or different members of the society, right?
definitely.
Autonomy, I think, is another one that I could think of. Is I mean, AI should respect human autonomy and empower individuals to make informed decisions, right?
Yeah,
Uh, AI is an enabler. AI is not here to replace humans, right? It's probably more of a complementary skill set that AI brings to the table. AI should not manipulate or deceive users or individuals to have control of how their data is used, right? This is a little bit of the same notion as social media, where
yeah,
when you go back to the days where we used to use newspapers, physical hard copies, down to digital copies of newspapers. Now people go to TikTok and other sites to get their news, right? So it's a paradigm shift, and this is something that has to be controlled, right? You cannot
yeah.
believe everything that you see in social media, but you can believe some of those organizations that are responsible for sharing news, right? So that's the difference that I'm talking about.
Yeah. So
Uh,
essentially just for like the greater good.
Yep, yep. And then the last part is justice, right? So it should
Yeah,
be developed and deployed fairly, right? And ensure that the risks, benefits are distributed, I mean, equitably, right? They are across different ethnicities, across the globe. It should not kind of perpetuate existing biases or discriminations based on gender or race or other characteristics, right? So
yeah.
I think that summarizes a lot. I mean, am I on the right track? Is that what you wanted to hear
Yeah.
around the?
Yeah, I mean, like it's completely up to you. You're the expert here, so
Yep.
whatever
Okay.
you say goes, right? I like that you brought up bias and fairness because that's actually leading into my second question, which was essentially how can we ensure that these AI systems are free from bias and treat everyone fairly regardless of gender or race, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I think making sure I'm just trying to relate to an example, right? Is
Okay.
how do you actually Let me put it this different way. There are a few different ways to consider this, right? The first thing that we do is with AI is use data sets, which means a lot of different data sets. As long as the data sets are diverse and represents different demographics, geographies, economies, socioeconomies, and backgrounds, that would really help, right? And then the second is the ability to detect bias and mitigate it within the models, right? This is part of the development effort. So this is something that, at least from a Google standpoint, we are looking at bias detection and mitigation and very, very seriously. So I would kind of anchor to these two. And maybe if I had to say a last one, I think enhancing the transparency of the AI algorithms, right, and the decision making process is crucial if we are looking for a wider adoption of generative AI. An
Yeah,
example could be techniques where you can provide insights with a reasoning behind it. Or every time
definitely.
you do a search, right, at Google, and you'll see some explanation that comes and summarizes it, but underneath that, it'll show you where this is grounded from, right? So that at least you can go back and then look at evidences. So that way you don't think that this is AI hallucinating, but this is exactly where you are providing transparency, you're explaining where this is coming from. And then it's a robust validation in my mind.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good response to that. I think the idea of transparency is also especially important. Knowing where things came from is always a lot more validating, especially even like as a user. I'm not necessarily going to
Mhm.
trust something if I don't know the source. Moving on to transparency, actually, what steps do you think should be taken which can make AI systems more transparent and understandable to people who aren't necessarily experts in that area?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just always use the analogy, even when some of my customers ask this question, is how just the mobile phone from everybody in the world switched predominantly from Nokia to like an Apple iPhone, right? Everything is just in one phone. But what was the best part about the iPhones? And again, I'm not promoting any brands here, but I think the best part I liked about the iPhones and the iOS in general is how simple and it is to adapt to using a phone, switching from wherever you are, right? I think the simplicity of the phone makes everything. So going back to your question is like, how can we make AI more transparent and understandable to non-experts? I think number one is we need to kind of start using plain language, right?
Yeah,
If I'm explaining AI to someone, it should be in simple terms and avoid any technical jargons, right? Second is showing how it works. So whether it's illustrative, right? It's more how does the decision making process work? We just talked about it with visuals, examples.
yeah,
Allow the room for asking questions, right? Encourage users to ask questions and provide answers, right?
definitely.
And be upfront about whenever you are selling or adapting or promoting a product, be upfront about talking about what the limitations are and the potential biases of AI, which is eventually going to remain, right? And
Yeah.
then a broader education of the public, right, is just to kind of give them resources to help people learn about AI and its impact. I think a combination of all these 3 4 points that I just made would
Yeah.
really help this make it more transparent, understandable, and the adoption would increase by tenfold.
Yeah, I think awareness and education are probably like the two most important, in my opinion, in order to make sure that people who aren't necessarily experts understand how AI works and understand how AI
Yep.
systems work. Moving on, I know that you mentioned previously that the developers who make these AI systems, they try to keep in mind like bias and like transparency and fairness and all of that good stuff. But in the event that an AI system causes harm or fails, who do you think should be held accountable?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, in my mind, it's a shared responsibility, right? It's a AI failure is a complex issue to talk about, right? Because it involves a network of contributors. However, I think there are several key stakeholders that could be held responsible, right? So let's start from the developers, right? Those who design and code AI bear a significant responsibility. They ensure that the system is thoroughly tested, free from biases, has built-in safety measures, right? The second
Yes.
is the deployers, right? The organizations or individuals who adapt AI in the real world scenarios also share the same responsibility. They need to fully understand the capabilities, the limitations, and have a clear guideline internally to their consumers, their customers on how to use it, right?
Yeah.
The third is data providers. Think about Bloomberg and then just in the financial context or just in general, large scale data providers. And this is where the data that we use to train AI is super crucial, right? If the data is biased, inaccurate, it could lead to really harmful outcomes, right? So the data providers must ensure quality and ethical sourcing is definitely a priority there.
Okay.
Uh, then I think number four that I could think of is, I mean, think about users like you guys, right? You guys are always on ChatGPT or Gemini or any of these AI, which is probably more generative based way to interact with AI.
Yeah.
While less common, I mean, users could be partially accountable as well, right?
Definitely.
Particularly if you misuse the AI to cheat on a test, write an essay, or do something else, right? There are different ways that users should be responsible as well to kind of really understand how to bring AI and use it for what versus replacing a test with an answer from an AI. So, and
Yeah.
then the last is we haven't talked about regulators yet, but government itself and the regulatory bodies play a key role in setting standards and guidelines for AI development, which is definitely in the mix right now. There's already a bill within White House for AI, but again, this is something that needs to be regulated, just like every other industry is regulated today.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. I think it's definitely like circumstantial. Especially with like users and like ChatGPT and things like that. At that point, most of the time, whenever misuse of ChatGPT and that sort of stuff happens, it usually is the user who isn't using it correctly or using it in a way that shouldn't be used or isn't allowed.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that's a good point that you bring up that users can also be held accountable. Let's talk a little bit more about like privacy and like data protection. That's been a thing ever since any new technology comes out, there's always been like oh, is my data going to be secure? Is it going to be protected? So knowing that, how can AI developers balance the benefits of AI with the need to protect user privacy?
Yeah, I think I probably touched upon it a little bit on the earlier question, but if you start building and thinking about AI with privacy first mindset, I think that's the first step in the process, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I think about AI as a new friend, right? I'm just kind of putting this in context of a 12 to 15-year olds who are listening this, right? You
yeah,
wouldn't share all your secrets with someone you just met, right?
definitely.
AI should only ask for the info it is absolutely needs to work and nothing more. So it's all about minimizing data, right? How much data you share, you can try to minimize that. The second is how can we maintain secret identities, right? Which means that how can I anonymize the data that I'm giving to AI? It does not need to have things like your social security number or your specific picture with your brother, right? Or maybe things which are very very private, right? Which is basically called as PII data, right? Your personal information need not be there. So sometimes AI needs to know some things about you, but it doesn't need to know everything about you. So your name, your address, your social security number, your phone number, AI doesn't need to know that. Make sense?
Yeah, yeah,
And
that
then
makes
third is locking things up, right? So it's all about how do you take the data, store it, secure it? How do you lock that data, right?
yeah,
Uh, if you like normally write diaries and your most embarrassing secrets are written in a diary, you would lock that up, right?
yeah,
And so this is exactly where the developers or everyone who is working or developing AI need to do with the data, right? Use strong security protocols, passwords. There are different security frameworks available and measures to keep it safe from hackers.
yeah. That makes
And,
sense.
and the last one I would say is it's just the transparency and user control, right? it should tell you upfront what info it is collecting, how it is being used, and there are no hidden agendas, right? So I think a summarization of all of that is a great way to kind of think about user privacy, right? And this is not just about AI, right? You're already doing this with search and you're doing this with e-commerce. And when you go on websites, there are trackers that kind of track every move that you do with your mouse, right? Things like that. But then there are ways that end users could use and solutions that they can protect their privacy. So
That makes sense. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Shifting gears back, I into like accountability. I know you mentioned before that like government regulations are also important when it comes to like who should be held accountable if AI takes over the world and that sort of stuff. So, keeping that in mind, what role do you think government regulation should play in ensuring responsible AI development?
yeah, again, good question. I think setting standards and guidelines is the number one thing, right? When I say setting standards and guidelines, what does it mean, right? I'll start all the way from setting technical standards, right? Ensuring AI systems are safe, reliable, transparent, right? Second is having the right ethical guidelines. We talked about promoting fairness, non discrimination, accountability. The last is privacy, right? We need to mandate AI systems to explain their decision making process, right? So I've kind of sum all of this up into like one bullet point that says setting standards and guidelines is the number one thing.
Yeah.
Number two is all about regulatory oversight and enforcements, right? Governments can create regulatory bodies or empower existing agencies to oversee AI development, right? This is nothing different than how we have done this in the past for anybody who is taking your credit card online, right? You have to go through a compliance process. You are audited. You have to maintain standards, right? There are risk assessments done when you are holding somebody's PII data or credit card information, right? So you go through PCI compliance, right? In pharma, you go through HIPAA compliance, right? In finance, you go through FINRA compliance. There are a lot of compliance bodies that exist today for non-AI work that is done today. It's exactly similar that we need to kind of take these and maybe merge it to a point which could then be applicable for AI. So a regulatory body is needed.
Yeah.
Number three, I've been talking about this in every single response that I gave you is public engagement and education, right? There are a lot of myths about AI. I don't think people still understand that AI has been in your lives from the last 20, 25 years, right? There are different names, right? I mean, think there are different branches of computer science. Like when you talk about machine learning, these are basically just you're predicting data or predicting outputs based on a defined data set, right? Now with artificial intelligence, it's kind of taking it a level further, and then when you're going to talk about deep learning, this is basically generative AI, right? Which is actually has layers and layers of these neural networks that makes a very complex pattern, right? And kind of gives you response in the way humans actually talk, interact, right? So that's why I think that engagement and education is super important to help everybody understand that AI is not here to take over the world. It is just has advanced significantly because of the efforts that has been put in over the last 20, 25 years.
Yeah, I think that's a
Thanks.
great point to make. I think just understanding like setting up like new regulations is important, but also remembering that we need to educate the public. I think that's also a good point. Shifting gears a little bit, talking less about our security and more about like AI and system security. What measures do you think could be implemented to ensure that these AI systems are safe and secure from any sort of like cyber attacks or things like that?
Uh, I think this is no different than how we secure our systems today across the board, right? Whether it's our defense systems or some of our most critical systems, which are hosted either on the cloud or within data centers or any of that, right? Uh, I think I would say it includes everything from robust data collection and storage. You need to kind of maintain data integrity, right? We need to kind of train models to recognize and resist attacks from malicious attackers looking to manipulate and input data to cause unexpected behavior, right? We need to
Yeah.
develop and start using secure coding practices, right? We need to kind of make sure that regression testings, we need to have the right compliance. We just talked about compliance as well, right? Have some sort of a regulatory body that is overseeing everything, right? When you talk about security, hey, here's a list of security controls that I'm talking about, right? But who's going to come and check that a startup, a small AI company that is building a large language model, right, for a specific use case, are
Yeah.
they being audited? That they have gone through these list of security controls, right? Those are the things that needs to happen. Is A, we need to have a list of security controls, right, for AI development. B, they need to have there needs to have a compliance standard to agree to that. And number three, they need to be audited to make sure that yes, whatever product is coming in the market is safe for the users to consume. Make sense?
Yeah. I think, yeah, that's really good. Again, like I know you mentioned regulations again as well. I think that's still really important. And then continuing what we've been doing with like other types of technology is also equally as important just to, keep our data and keep AI systems safe as well.
Yep.
Shifting gears a little less from like away from the technology aspect of it and talking more about the environmental impact of it. Technology in general tends to consume a lot of energy, and given the effects of it on the environment, how do you think the environmental impact of AI systems can be managed, especially regarding energy consumption and resource use?
Yeah, I don't think there's a one single approach. I think it's a multifaceted approach, right? It
Definitely.
kind of goes all the way from hardware optimization, right? When you talk about these AI chipsets and hardware specifically for, they need to be built for energy efficiency, right? Utilizing techniques like specialized architectures or low power designs and things like that.
Yeah.
Number two is we need to kind of start thinking about how do we optimize our the algorithms, right? So develop algorithms that are less computational intensive, right? Which eventually reduces energy consumption, right?
Yeah.
Uh, the amount of models that are there in the market right now, I can't even digest it, right? So there's has to be some sort of a model compression, right? We need to kind of start employing techniques like pruning and quantization to kind of reduce model size and complexity, which again leads to lower energy requirements, right? Um,
Yeah.
and then I think sustained AI infrastructure, if you're going to think about it like that, right? So, kind of using powering AI data centers and cloud data centers, which we already are at Google, with renewable energy sources like solar and wind power, right? Making energy efficient data centers and thinking about like cloud computing and AI computing in general to keep it as more as a green versus just a carbon emission, right? So I think that's another point that I wanted to make. And then just responsible AI deployment as well. It's not just about the development and how it is consuming infrastructure and hardware and energy, but also how do you deploy it, right? It has to be a need-based AI deployment, right? You're going to
Definitely.
have prioritized development and deployment of AI applications. How do you maintain the life cycle of this deployment, right? So,
Yeah.
and then at the end, I would just say just user awareness and education.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I also think it's important that you brought up how Google already has or is working on these cloud centers that are sustainable, because it shows that it is possible and it is something that we should strive towards. So I think that's also really important. So when we talk about AI, a lot of people always think of this one word, and that's jobs, right? Like, what's going to happen to my job if AI comes in and I'm no longer useful? So given that, how can AI systems be designed to effectively collaborate with humans? So like rather than replacing human jobs, we can enhance their human capabilities.
Yeah, yeah. I did mention this in my earlier response as well. Is I think the way industry experts and the industry in general is thinking about AI is not to replace humans, but again to kind of make them more efficient. And this has happened over the years when you talk about industrial revolution, right? Starting from when you started getting machines down to the first mainframe computer down to different, I think, innovation that has happened in the computer science as well, right? So this is no different. So it's every single innovation has enhanced, I think, and optimized how humans interact with it, right? And making it more productive for the humans. So this is exactly where AI is going as well. But I would just encourage everyone listening to think about AI as a super smart teammate on your team, right? Not someone who's going to come and take your job.
Yeah.
We want this teammate to kind of help everyone on the team, even the quiet kids, right? Who might get overlooked sometimes. You had a
Yeah.
question? Excuse me. So, how do you do that? It's about like knowing the whole team, right? Just like you have different friends with. Sorry, I need some
Yeah,
water.
okay.
Ah, never mind. So, just like you have different friends with different strengths and weaknesses, right? AI needs to understand everyone's abilities, right? This is where each person can shine, not just the star players, right? AI should be designed to kind of complement human capabilities, right?
Mhm.
However, we still need to maintain and leverage what humans have, which is the creativity and critical thinking and ethical judgment capabilities, which you can eventually train AI, but it will never be on the same par as humans, right? So
Yeah.
that's definitely there. Number two is we just need to make sure that we play fair, right? So we talked about this in the earlier question as well. We need to make sure that AI doesn't favor one group over the other. It's like having a referee keeping things balanced, right? That's the mindset.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and the idea is once you consider that as a teammate, I mean, we always use this phrase in Google as teamwork makes dream work, right? So
Yeah.
we need all sorts of people with different ideas and perspective to make sure AI helps everyone, right? This the same thing goes here as well.
Yeah.
And the last I would say is, you know, clear instructions and listen to feedback. Imagine playing a game without knowing their rules. It's going to be a chaos, right?
Yeah.
So we need to tell AI exactly what its goals are, making sure that it understands that helping everyone is a top priority, right? And again, listening to feedback, right? This is how you kind of have a continuous feedback model. When I kind of get into the technical way of developing AI, is how you continuously keep training the models and getting feedback, right? So this is where good teammates, when you go back to the team example, listen to each other. If someone feels like they are being left out of the game, isn't fair, they speak up. AI needs to be the same way, right? Open to feedback so it can improve and be a better teammate for everyone. Hope that
Yeah.
answers the question.
Yeah, I really like the analogy of teamwork. I think that really helps, especially as someone who may not have a background in AI. I think that
Yep.
was a nice way to sum it up for us. Last but not least, let's talk about some long-term implications of AI. So, knowing that AI is this up and coming industry that no one really knows like what's going to happen, the possibilities are pretty much endless. What do you think are the long-term implications, especially within society, of AI adoption, and how can we prepare for any potential challenges with it?
Yeah, I would say I'm just going to keep anchoring towards like you're going to see a lot of increased productivity and efficiency, right?
Yeah.
AI can streamline processes, optimize resource allocation, accelerate innovation, you name it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that is potentially going to lead to significant economic growth, right? And improved living standards, right? You're talking about example, right? Improvement in healthcare and well-being, right? AI powered diagnostics, treatment recommendations, personalized medicine. It could revolutionize healthcare, right? Same thing on the education side of the house, right? Imagine you having a personalized learning experience, right? Providing real time feedback. It can help you automate a lot of your tasks, specifically when you're in high school, right? You're juggling with a lot of different things, and AI could help you. So, in this case, AI is your assistant, AI is not replacing you, right? So, that's another example.
Yeah.
And then at the end, there's going to be a economic transformation. So I'm not going to say there is not going to be an economic transformation, right? AI automation may lead to job displacement in some sectors while creating a set of new jobs in the others, right? So the shift will require significant adjustments in education, workforce development, and this is no different than any technology that the world has embraced over the last decades. So this is no different. So
Yeah.
going back to what I just said, how do you prepare for your challenges, right? I would say it again and again and again is everyone, doesn't matter how old you are, you need to kind of keep investing yourself in education, continuous education and reskilling, right? We need to
Yeah.
prepare our workforce for the future by providing opportunities for lifelong learning and retraining, particularly when you are in a STEM field or any kind of AI related field, right? Uh, Again, going back to the next point is promoting ethical AI development, right? So
Yeah.
encouraging research and development of AI that adheres to specific ethical principles, fairness, transparency, accountability. Then we can also kind of talk about strengthening data privacy and security. So implementing strong regulations and practices to protect individuals' data and preventing it from misusing. Right? These are some of the challenges that we can tackle. And developing global frameworks, right? So this way, world could be a very very small place, or could feel a very small place, right? This the way we can do it is by fostering international collaboration, right?
Yeah.
And to ensure this responsible and ethical AI practices is not just limited to a US or an India or a China. It has to be a global standard. And
Yeah.
and and the last but not the least is we need to encourage public engagement, and what you are doing right now is a perfect example of that. You are hosting a podcast where you're going to say, hey, here's my point of view on AI and responsible AI, and here's an industry expert that I brought you. Don't take my word for it. Here's how the industry thinks about it. So this is an example of how we encourage public engagement, promote a public dialogue. Not everybody would agree to everything that I have said, but I'm sure as long as I'm open to feedback, right, and there is always something that we can learn together. So that's the mindset that we need to have.
Yeah. I think that's a really great point. And I just want to say thank you for all the valuable insight and information that you shared so far. I think it's especially useful to hear it from, again, like you said, an expert rather than trying to figure things out by yourself on the internet. And I'm confident this will be helpful for anyone who's out there watching or listening. So thank you for being here.
No, thank you for inviting me, and again, good luck. And it's a great initiative, and I'm super proud of you and all the work that you're doing.
Thank you.